The parable of the broken path. There is a story of a master craftsman, renowned for his exquisite pottery. One day, his apprentice watches in horror as the master takes his most promising new vase, perfectly formed, impossibly thin, and deliberately lets it fall to the stone floor, where it shatters into a dozen pieces. The apprentice, aghast at the senseless destruction, begins to sweep up the shards. "Stop," the master says calmly. He kneels, not to mourn the loss, but to meticulously gather the fragments. "The vessel is not finished," he explains. "It has only just begun its most important transformation." This is the parable of our modern lives, though we have been taught to misunderstand it completely. We are culturally conditioned to see failure as a final verdict and success as a straight, unblemished line ascending toward a distant peak. This is our great deception. It is a map that not only fails to describe the territory of a meaningful life, but actively leads us astray into the deserts of burnout, regret, and unfulfilled potential. This essay argues that this linear view is a dangerous fiction. The true path to profound achievement is not a pristine highway, but a series of what we mistakenly call failures, strategic detours, necessary breaks, and forced rein. To fail like a genius is not to glorify defeat or to romanticize collapse. It is to master the forgotten arts of resilience, reflection, and redirection. It is to understand that the moments that feel like endings are, in fact, incubators for our greatest strengths. We will deconstruct the myth of linear success, dissect the psychology of those who turn setbacks into setups, and draw on the timeless wisdom of philosophers who found strength not in avoiding the abyss, but in staring into it. We will then translate this wisdom into actionable frameworks for unlearning the beliefs that hold us back, relearning the skills that move us forward, and, ultimately, monetizing the very detours we once lamented as mistakes. As the philosopher Voltaire observed, the only true regret is for what we did not do. This is a guide to doing, to trying, and to understanding that the breaks and scars are not flaws to be hidden, but the very marks of a life lived with courage and intelligence. The Great Deception. Deconstructing the myth of linear success. Our society is built upon a foundational falsehood: the linear career path myth. This narrative is deceptively simple and dangerously seductive. It suggests that our professional lives unfold in a straight, predictable sequence. We identify a goal in our youth, pursue a direct educational and professional route, climb a single ladder, and arrive at a comfortable retirement. This clean, orderly progression is held up as the ideal, the very definition of a successful life. The problem is, this model reflects almost no one's reality. The modern career is not a ladder, but what Sir Dominic Cadbury called crazy paving. A path you must lay yourself, stone by irregular stone. The linear myth creates false expectations, leading to profound frustration and the sense of being locked in. When life, as it inevitably does, deviates from the script, it causes us to misinterpret valuable market feedback as personal failure and to miss the very opportunities that are hidden within our detours. The lives of some of history's most iconic figures reveal that the detour is not a deviation from the path. It is the path. The exile as incubator. In 1985, Steve Jobs was publicly and humiliatingly ousted from Apple, the company he co-founded. This was not a quiet departure. It was a boardroom coup that cast him as a volatile and unmanageable force. His combative style and obsession with creating cutting-edge hardware ran counter to the more pragmatic, business-focused vision of CEO John Sculley in the board. By every conventional measure, this was a colossal failure. Jobs was an exile, stripped of his creation. Yet, this failure was the single most important event in securing Apple's future dominance. Forced out, Jobs did not retreat. He entered a period of intense, involuntary research and development. He founded Next, a company dedicated to building the powerful, high-end computers he had been prevented from making in Apple. Simultaneously, he acquired a small computer graphics division from Lucasfilm and transformed it into Pixar. These were not distractions. They were the two pillars of his future empire. Next, while a commercial disappointment, developed a revolutionary operating system that would become the foundation for macOS, the software that resurrected the Macintosh line upon his return. 8. Pixar, meanwhile, did not just make movies, it pioneered an entire industry. Toy Story, the world's first fully computer-animated feature film, giving Jobs immense credibility and a new understanding of the intersection between technology and culture. When the struggling Apple acquired Next in 1997, it wasn't just bringing a founder home. It was acquiring the technology and the visionary leader it desperately needed to survive. Jobs' exile was not a barren wilderness. It was a laboratory where he forged the weapons for his return. His failure was a misdiagnosis of timing. He had a vision the company was not yet ready for, and his ousting forced him to build that future elsewhere, only to sell it back to them when they were on the brink of collapse. The demotion is redirection. Oprah Winfrey's journey offers a different, but equally powerful, lesson in misdiagnosed failure. Early in her career, she was a news anchor in Baltimore. She was demoted from this coveted role and told by her boss that she was unfit for television news. She was too emotional, too empathetic. She couldn't detach from the stories she was reporting. She became too invested in the people involved, a fatal flaw in the objective, dispassionate world of hard news. This setback, which she said shook me to my very core, was not a verdict on her talent, but a crucial redirection. The very qualities that made her a failed news anchor were the exact ingredients that would make her the most successful talk show host in history. Her demotion pushed her into daytime television, where her empathy, vulnerability, and profound connection with her audience were not liabilities but superpowers. She redefined the talk show format, moving it from sensationalism to a platform for authentic human stories, personal growth, and shared experience. Her failure was a failure of role fit. She was a brilliant performer, placed in the wrong arena. The demotion was the market signal, pushing her from a job she could do into the work she was born to do. The stories of Jobs and Winfrey are not mere exceptions. They are exemplars of a deeper truth. The Latin proverb per aspera ad astra, through hardships to the stars, is not a hopeful platitude but a literal description of the trajectory of genius. The aspera of being fired, demoted, or rejected are the necessary friction, the gravitational slingshot required to reach the astra. The linear path is a fantasy. The real journey is forged in the crucible of these strategic detours. The alchemist's mind. The psychology of a successful failure. The external event of failure is neutral. A project fails, a company folds, a job is lost. These are facts. Whether these facts become a tombstone marking the end of a dream, or a stepping stone to a greater reality is determined entirely by our internal psychological framework. The genius of failure is not an innate talent, but a cultivated mindset, an alchemical ability to transmute the lead of defeat into the gold of wisdom and resilience. This requires mastering a specific set of psychological tools, the foundational mindset, fixed versus growth. At the core of this internal alchemy is the mental operating system we use to process reality. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck identifies to such systems: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. This distinction is the primary determinant of how one responds to failure. A person with a fixed mindset believes that their traits, intelligence, talent, character are inherent and unchangeable. From this perspective, failure is catastrophic. It is not an event, it is a verdict on their fundamental worth. A failed business means I am not a good entrepreneur. A rejected manuscript means I am not a good writer. This mindset leads to a life of avoidance, choosing easier tasks to prevent the risk of being judged, putting in minimal effort because if talent is fixed, why bother improving? Setbacks are seen as permanent and defining. Conversely, a person with a growth mindset believes that abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. For them, failure is not a verdict, it is feedback. It is information. A failed business reveals flaws in the strategy, not in the founder. A rejected manuscript highlights weaknesses in the craft that can be improved. This mindset fosters a love of challenge and a resilience that is essential for long-term success. Effort is not a sign of weakness, but the very path to mastery. It is no coincidence that when NASA selects its astronauts, it actively rejects applicants with pure histories of success, and instead chooses those who have demonstrated the ability to bounce back from significant failure. They are not looking for perfection. They are looking for the proven capacity to learn and adapt under pressure, confronting the inner demons, shame, vulnerability, and the shadow. A growth mindset provides the philosophical permission to fail, but it is the confrontation with our deepest emotions that provides the psychological power. Failure's most potent weapon is shame. Researcher Brown draws a crucial distinction between guilt and shame. Guilt is I did something bad, while shame is I am bad. Guilt is productive. It can lead to immense and changed behavior. Shame is toxic. It is highly correlated with addiction, depression, aggression, and eating disorders. When we fail, The inner critic whispers, "I am a screw-up. I am a failure." This feeling of shame is the heavy rock under which we hide, preventing any possibility of growth. The antidote to shame, Brown argues, is vulnerability. We are taught to see vulnerability as weakness, but her research redefines it as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It is, in fact, the very measure of courage. As one Special Forces soldier told her, there can be no courage without vulnerability. To dare greatly, in the words of the Theodore Roosevelt quote Brown famously champions, is to step into the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, knowing you might fail but choosing to strive anyway. It is the conscious choice to risk failure in pursuit of a worthy goal. This brave step into the arena often forces an encounter with what the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called the shadow. The parts of our personality that we have repressed, rejected, or left undeveloped. Failure brings our weaknesses, our fears, and our inadequacies into the harsh light of day. Our instinct is to run, to deny these unpleasant truths. But Jung warned that this avoidance is the source of neuroses, a replacement for an evasion of what life demands of us. True transformation comes from accepting this darker side. As Jung powerfully stated, what you deny subdues you, what you accept transforms you. Integrating the shadow, acknowledging our role in the failure without succumbing to shame, is how we become whole and psychologically resilient, escaping the cognitive traps. Sunk costs and imposter syndrome. This psychological work is often sabotaged by common cognitive biases. The most insidious of these is the sunk cost fallacy, our irrational tendency to continue a failing course of action because we have already invested so much time, money, or effort. We think, if I quit my PhD program now, the last 5 years will have been wasted. Or, as one lawyer on the partnership track described, after dedicating years to a profession they disliked, the thought of leaving feels like negating that entire investment. This is the logic of a gambler chasing losses. It allows our past self to hold our future self hostage, condemning it to continued suffering to justify a past decision. In this context, quitting is not an act of failure. It is an act of profound courage and rationality. It is the heroic decision to stop pouring good money after bad, to write off the sunk cost to liberate the future. This fear of quitting is often intertwined with imposter syndrome, the persistent internal feeling of being a fraud, despite evidence of success. Fueled by shame, the person with imposter syndrome lives in constant fear of being found out. This makes them terrified of failure, as any mistake could be the moment the mask is ripped off, revealing them as unworthy. The psychological journey of a successful failure is thus a tightly integrated process. It begins with a growth mindset, which gives one the permission to try something where failure is a real possibility. This requires the emotional courage of vulnerability to step into that uncertainty. When failure inevitably occurs, it triggers an encounter with our shadow. By integrating the lessons from this encounter, instead of succumbing to shame, we gain the clarity and self-awareness to make rational decisions. This clarity allows us to overcome the sunk cost fallacy, courageously quitting the path that isn't working and redirecting our energy toward a more promising one. It is not grit alone that builds resilience. It is this deep psychological literacy that transforms a victim of circumstance into an alchemist of fate, the philosopher's stone, forging strength in the abyss. The psychological frameworks for navigating failure are powerful, but they stand on the shoulders of giants. For millennia, philosophers have grappled with the nature of adversity, and their wisdom provides a timeless, unshakable foundation for building resilience. They teach us that the struggle with failure is not a modern problem but a fundamental aspect of the human condition, and that the tools for overcoming it have been available to us all along. The Stoic forge control, obstacles, and resilience. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome built their entire worldview around a single, powerful idea: the dichotomy of control. As the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Meditations, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Failure is an external event. It is outside our control. The market shifts, a competitor emerges, a pandemic strikes. What is entirely within our control is our perception of and response to that event. This simple distinction is the bedrock of inner peace. From this foundation, the Stoics built a radical and empowering approach to adversity. Marcus Aurelius did not just teach acceptance of obstacles, he taught that they were the raw material for virtue. He famously wrote, The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. A failure is not a dead end. It is a new path revealed. A rejection is not a wall. It is a chance to practice humility and persistence. The obstacle itself becomes the fuel for our progress. The philosopher Seneca extended this idea with a powerful metaphor. He argued that the strongest trees are not found in sheltered valleys, but on windswept plains, forced to fight for their existence against the element. No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many a wind assails it, he wrote, for by its very tossing it tightens its grip and plants its roots more securely. This idea resonates across cultures, echoed in the African proverb, smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. Adversity is not an unfortunate accident to be avoided. It is the necessary training ground for strength, the Nietzschean ascent, suffering, power, and the love of fate. While the Stoics taught into the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche taught something more radical, the active embrace of suffering as a prerequisite for greatness. In a passage that shocks modern sensibilities, Nietzsche wrote, "To those human beings who are of any concern to me, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill treatment. I have no pity for them, because I wish them the only thing that can prove today whether one is worth anything or not. That one endures." For Nietzsche, comfort and ease lead to mediocrity. True greatness is forged only in the fires of hardship. The poison which destroys the weaker nature, he declared, strengthens the stronger. This strengthening occurs through the exercise of what he called the will to power, often misinterpreted as a desire for crude domination over others. Nietzsche's concept was primarily about self-mastery, the creative drive to overcome one's own weaknesses, to discipline oneself to wholeness, and to impose one's own values on a meaningless world. Failure, in this view, is the resistance against which the will to power is It is in overcoming resistance that power is felt to increase, which Nietzsche defined as the essence of happiness. The ideal human, is not a tyrant but a value-creating and value-destroying free spirit, who perpetually overcomes himself. This philosophy culminates in Nietzsche's ultimate test, amour fati, the love of one's fate. He asks us to imagine that a demon appears and tells us that our life, with every joy and every sorrow, every success and every failure, will repeat itself in the exact same sequence for all eternity. Would we curse this demon, or would we fall to our knees and thank it? The Bermensch has lived a life of self-creation without regret, would joyfully will this eternal recurrence, for they have learned to love everything that has happened to them, including their failures, as necessary steps in their own becoming. The Taoist flow, insecurity, letting go, and emergence. If Stoicism provides the shield and Nietzsche the sword, the Eastern philosophy of Taoism, as articulated by the British philosopher Alan Watts, provides the wisdom of water. Watts critiqued the Western obsession with seeking security in a fundamentally insecure and impermanent universe. Our frantic striving for a fixed outcome called success is the very source of our anxiety. Failure is simply reality's way of reminding us that the world is fluid and uncontrollable. The Taoist response is to let go. This is not passive resignation but an active softening, a conscious choice to stop clenching against reality. When we grasp too tightly at a specific goal, our hands are closed to other possibilities. As Watts explained, when you hold on too tightly, your hands are full. You have no room to receive. A failure, a lost job, a failed company is often the moment we are forced to unclench our fists, making space for something new to enter. This leads to what's called the backwards law. The more you consciously try to force a positive state like happiness or success, the more it eludes you. Peace and joy are our natural state when we stop fighting the current of life. A failed project is often the moment we are forced to stop trying so hard, which allows something more honest, more grounded, more alive to emerge in its place. Together, these three philosophical traditions offer a cohesive practice for navigating failure. The Stoic begins by differentiating between what they can and cannot control, focusing their energy solely on their own response. The Nietzschean then takes this uncontrollable external event and actively uses it as a whetstone to sharpen their will, creating new strength and meaning from the struggle. Finally, the Taoist completes the process by letting go of the attachment to the original, failed outcome, thereby opening themselves to the new, unforeseen possibilities that flow from the change. This is the ultimate antidote to the victim mentality. It is the realization that meaning is not something found in success, but something created in our response to failure. The art of the pivot, actionable strategies for it. Philosophy provides the why, and psychology provides the what. This section provides the how, translating the high-minded principles of resilience into concrete, repeatable actions is what separates the amateur from the genius of failure. Reinvention is not a mystical event. It is a systematic process of psychological and behavioral engineering. Conclusion. The parable of the kintsugi master. We return to the craftsman and his shattered the apprentice. Now, understanding, watches as the master works. He does not try to hide the cracks. Instead, he meticulously fills them with a lacquer mixed with powder gold. This ancient Japanese art is called ki. Its philosophy is profound. The broken object is not merely repaired, it is transformed. The lines of fracture, now traced in brilliant gold, become the most beautiful part of the piece. They tell a story of its history, its damage, and its resilient recovery. The vase is more beautiful, more valuable, and more compelling because it was broken. This is the final, most powerful metaphor for a life well. It embodies the Japanese proverb Nanakarobi Yaoki, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. The goal is not to avoid falling, but to rise each time with new strength and grace. The journey of failing like a genius is the journey of becoming a kintsugi master of the self. We begin by shattering the great deception of the linear path, understanding that the detours of a Jobs or an Winfrey are where true greatness is forged. We then become alchemists of the mind, using the psychological tools of a growth mindset, vulnerability, and shadow work to gather our own broken pieces. We draw on the philosopher's stone, the timeless wisdom of the Stoics. Nietzsche and the Taoists to find the courage to begin the repair. We apply the practical strategies of unlearning, feedback, and fear setting as the artisan's techniques for mending our own fractures. And finally, we enter the Phoenix economy, realizing that the final, golden-seamed vessel is more valuable and interesting than the perfect version that existed before the break. Look at your own life. Look at the resume gaps, the failed ventures, the painful rejections, the career pivots. These are your cracks. For too long, you have been taught to see them as sources of shame, as evidence of your inadequacy, but they are not. They are the lines waiting to be traced in gold. They are the proof that you have been in the arena. They are the source of your deepest wisdom and your most unique strengths. You are not broken. You are becoming a masterpiece, not in spite of your failures, but because of them. Don't just bounce back. Break beautifully. Fail like a genius.